As I mentioned, when we talk about global and international public relations, most often what we're talking about public relations in a foreign country or doing public relations for a foreign corporation. Most of the research on international and global public relations, most of the practice in international global public relations is simply doing public relations in a foreign country or doing public relations for a foreign corporation. So how do you adjust to that experience, and how do people study about this kind of experience? It turns out that researchers found out that in order to be successful in practicing public relations in a foreign environment or for a foreign corporation, what you need to do is you need to study and adjust to something called environmental variables. And they identified that there are three big categories of environmental variable: political environment, economic environment, and societal or cultural environment. Specifically for public relations, people also identified the fourth category that is extremely important, which is media environment. Since public relations, if you think back to the discussion of definitions, and many of those definitions had communication in them. If what we do in public relations is we communicate, a lot of those communications are mediated communications. We rely on media, be it mass media or social media. We have to have that media landscape in order to enable us to communicate, and media environment is very important. While the main three categories, politics, economy, and culture, they affect pretty much anything, and in fact they were developed in international business, not even in international communications. Research and business organizations are using them when they analyze new markets or they decide where to open new production facilities or whatever it may be. So if you get assigned to go do public relations in a foreign country, or if you get a job offer for a foreign corporation, what you need to do is to study environmental variables and compare them to the environment to which you are used to, which is usually your home country or where you're working right now. So political environment, what you need to obviously look at is the actual political system. Is it democracy, or maybe it's a monarchy, or maybe it's a theocracy, or whatever. A lot of different interplay in between and the subcategories of these political systems you may have, because absolute monarchy is going to be very different from parliamentary monarchy, and this political system obviously have an effect on how you practice public relations or how you even do marketing campaigns. Obviously, if you have a monarch in a particular country, that monarch may be very popular and a lovable figure, and you can use that in order to sell your product. The type of governance, is it a federal state, federal country, or is it unitarian? Are they divided into states like the United States, or is it one big country? Because again, if you are looking at the federal government, there are many states with different levels of autonomy, and you may not even have to have, in addition to, let's say, federal government approval to conduct business, you may have to deal with the local government, and the local governments can be very strong in some countries and can be very weak in other countries, having almost no influence at all on what's going on. Again, it's all that as a public relations person responsible for identifying important publics, it is your job to figure out how it works in this particular location. Political ideologies can have a significant effect on how you can practice public relations in a foreign country. It's more than just the political system or the type of governance, but it's also what the government believes about itself and what the people believe about the government. What is the expectation? What does the government, do they believe that the government needs to give them a brand new house for free, or do they believe that that's not government responsibility at all? And that has an effect on how you would conduct a campaign in the particular country or how you would organize business in a particular country. There are different level of political risks that should be analyzed when you enter in a new country. There are micro and macro risks, and typically macro risks involves everything. For example, if you are a chain of restaurants, let's say Taco Bell, and you open in a certain location, in a certain country, and there is a revolution in that country, and all property gets nationalized, like happened in Cuba, for example, after Cuban Revolution, then you're going to lose your property. And it doesn't matter what country you are from or what kind of business you are in, all property gets nationalized. That's a macro level of political risk. So you would look how stable the government of that country is, how likely something like that to happen there. And micro risk refers to something specific to a particular country or to a particular business. For example, if your country gets in a war with another country, chances are that the products or businesses of the country that you are fighting against are not going to be very popular and not going to be very well received. So this is micro level because it doesn't affect everything, it just affects your particular country or a particular business, for example. Government involvement, how acceptable and how expected the government involvement is business. Is it expected that government, like in the United States, it's almost expected that the local government will kick in something if you open in a facility in there. They'll give you tax breaks or they'll give you some loan or whatever else. In other countries, that's unheard of to expect the government to give you millions of dollars for opening a facility in their location. And of course, legal system. Sometimes legal system is even considered a separate category other than political, economic, or culture. But in our case, I threw it in with the political system. But legal system is important. You cannot have business, you cannot have transactions without proper infrastructure for supporting those transactions. Even employment laws can be extremely important, how you pay employees. In some countries, it's customary to have one salary on paper and then give the rest in cash to help your employees pay less in taxes, where taxes are extremely high. So all these issues obviously become important if you are planning to enter a foreign country or run business in a foreign country, and political system is the most important influence on all of that. But not the only one. Economy is also very important, the size of the economy. Obviously, if you're planning to, if you are a company that sells cars, then, and you go to a country where the whole size of the economy is less than one rural town in the United States, for example, or one state in the United States, you cannot expect significant sales. So maybe investing a lot of money in the campaigns and setting up offices is not the best solution. So size of the economy is very important. The type of economic system, different macroeconomic indicators, GDP, PPP, gross domestic product purchasing power parity, for example, meaning how much the company is actually producing its overall product. That's a function of economic size as well. But with purchasing power parity, it talks about the strength of the currency in this particular country, or the Gini ratio, which talks about inequality level. If there are very, very rich people and very, very, very poor people, then the products that you would customarily sell in countries like US, for example, targeted at middle class, may not do very well. You need to focus on luxury goods and then very cheap products. So all of this has an influence on your decision to enter a particular country. So here is an example. There is a very interesting, I think, map that was done by Bank of America. It is a little bit dated. It's 2014. I could not find a more recent one. I mean, I guess I could have made one myself. But what's great about this map, it shows you, it compares you the size of the whole economy with the size of a corporation. And so you can see, for example, the largest country in the world, Russia, the GDP of Russia, the all economic power of Russia is comparable with just one Procter & Gamble, not even the largest company you can think of. So think about, again, the size of the economy. If you're selling cars, how many cars can you expect to sell in Russia if all the goods and services produced, everything, is equal to just what one Procter & Gamble produces? The size of the economy is relatively small, so you cannot really expect much from Russia in terms of sales. Or even a more extreme example, if you look in Africa, if you look at Egypt, then the whole economy of Egypt is comparable with just one chain of burgers, Burger King. Again, think about the size of the economy. Is it even worth it for you to enter this particular market? Or maybe it's not. So these considerations are important when you're thinking about economy and the size of the economy and different economic indicators. Society and culture. Culture is extremely important. Something as simple as a handshake is very different ritual in different countries. And taking all this into account can mean a difference between actually signing a contract or being successful in a particular country or failing miserably. And culture is a learned system of meanings, meaning you have to learn it, you have to put an effort. And people are not born with a particular culture, but by living in a certain country, they absorb this. And sometimes it makes it very difficult to learn a culture as a foreigner. You cannot usually learn it in a few weeks or during a short travel. You may spend years in a particular country. And so many companies, when they're actually designing a campaign for a particular region, it is recommended to involve local people in the campaign planning, hire some local employees, because they are part of that culture and they are part of the shared identity and shared community, and they can help you identify any potential missteps if you are helping them, or help you identify successful steps, something that can help your campaign be more successful. And the issue with culture is complex. It's not something, do this way, don't do this way. There are a lot of nuances here. Often it's subconscious. You may not even realize what you are doing or how you perceive other people or other issues, because it's done on a subconscious level. And to make it even more difficult, it is dynamic. It changes. The culture, let's say in Russia 20 years ago, was very different from what it is today. And 40 years ago, it was USSR, so it was completely different. All these things change, and if you go out of the country for a few years, you come back, you may not even recognize it. And culture is not monolith. There are a lot of different cultures, there are a lot of different subcultures within the culture. Think about United States, compare, you would say American culture. What is American culture? Is it Hollywood? Or is it Iowa? Or is it Alaska? Or is it New York City? There are a lot of different subcultures. Even within New York City, there are different subcultures. Manhattan and Bronx. So this makes it very difficult, and that's why it's important to involve local people to help you with that. Or if you can, then at least test and pre-test on local people, on local cultures. Do research before you go in public with something. One of the best research projects on cultures was done at IBM, and they identify cultural dimensions, sometimes called Hofstadter dimensions, based on the name of the researcher who did the study. And it's been done many years ago, so the dimensions actually changed. They're still often called Hofstadter dimensions, but now there are more dimensions. They're slightly different than they used to be at the beginning. But the idea is, if you want to understand the culture, you can use those dimensions to see how the cultures compare between each other and how you can adjust your behavior and your campaigns to the particular culture. Power distance, for example, one of the key early dimensions in the culture is how do we treat the distance between, let's say, a supervisor and an employee. Can you just walk in and talk with the person on a first name basis, or is it more formal where you need to make an appointment, and there is a secretary in between. You cannot go directly. It even happens in a university setting. Can a student just come up to a professor and ask a question, or is there a more formal process involved where a student need to set an appointment, attend a particular office hours in a certain time? And there is a significant difference in power distance between countries. Individualism is the focus on individual achievement, or collectivism, where we all work together, where societal needs are above the individual needs. Masculinity, femininity, again, what is the focus of the society, what the culture considers to be acceptable behavior? Is it more supportive or being more aggressive? Uncertainty avoidance, another important dimension, saying how comfortable people are with lack of information when they are planning for the future. Are they okay? Well, let's just see what happens, or do they need to plan and collect data and do research? You can do completely different campaigns depending upon uncertainty avoidance result for a particular country. Long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Do people want to be rewarded right now, or they're okay thinking long-term, as in, many Asian cultures are often considered to be long-term orientation. There is no rush. Let's focus on what's happening long-term, thousands of years increments. Indulgence, where the focus is on personal pleasure, personal satisfaction. Context, where you want direct communication, yes or no, or it's more indirect, where you try to get clues from the context, where it's not polite to say no, instead you say something maybe, but people need to understand from the context that it actually means no. Time, some cultures are very strict about time. Everything is by deadline. Meeting times are set in stone, and some cultures are very open about time. And how do you conduct business in this environment if you are all set on schedule? If you are a German company in Brazil, for example, and you need to have an event for the public in the Brazil, and you set it for 12 and nobody shows up at 12, but then somebody shows up at 2 and you already think that nobody came. So all this becomes a challenge in managing international public relations, international campaigns, international business, international communications. And of course, culture is not the only component of the society. There is also language. Obviously, you cannot do campaign in a foreign language in a certain country, so it's as basic as that, but language also has an effect on how we think and how we perceive the culture and how we perceive ourselves. There are languages that have words that are not translatable in our languages, and that again shapes our perception, shapes our understanding. Same way is with religion. Religion has a strong effect on the way how we see ourselves and how others see our countries, and different behavioral practices as well. And then finally, media, the environmental variable that is unique just for us in public relations, but it is very important for us. Who owns the media? If you want to, let's say, introduce a product that competes with a local product and all the local media is owned by the same company that produced that local product, you may be in trouble and you may not have easy time getting access to the media. So instead of mass media, you maybe should shift to social media, or maybe you should shift to owned media and have your own website, for example, where you would focus on. Media infrastructure. Do people read newspapers? Do they watch TV? What kind of channels exist? Maybe it's all about radio. Maybe there is broadcasting TV doesn't even reach in all the people in the country. So maybe you should be on radio. So whatever it may be, different media regulations, professional standards, media reach, media access, media concentration, all of those issues need to be taken in account when you're planning international and global campaigns. There might be regions, countries where there is no one universal language, where one village doesn't understand what's happening in the other village. how do you do a campaign in this particular country if there is a challenge with basic communications and there is no media that can accommodate all of that? What else do you do? Do you do then spoken word and you engage spokespeople who go to different villages and talk in their languages? What kind of strategy you want to come up with that? And media concentration, probably the most interesting thing here in the United States, how concentrated our media landscape is, that almost everything is owned by 5 companies, and now even less because Disney bought 21st Century Fox. So that disappeared, that slide is already outdated. Now Disney and 21st Century Fox, the same company. So now we have, what, 4 companies left. So if you want to go against Disney, for example, what other opportunities do you have? Not that many chances left. Media is extremely concentrated. Or if you want to start your own media, what are you going to do? You cannot go against those multi-billion conglomerates. Media concentration is a very significant issue in the United States, and media ownership in general, because they all corporations, all for-profit organizations, versus, let's say, Europe, where it's more common to have government-owned, not-for-profit media organizations like BBC, which is doing very well and is probably one of the best in terms of the quality of news coverage.